There are patterns of behavior that damage relationships quietly, not through sudden conflict, but through a consistent distortion of truth, attention, and emotional balance. And one of the most destructive among them is narcissism. Narcissism is not simply confidence or self-respect, because those qualities allow space for others, while narcissistic behavior absorbs space, redirects attention, and slowly reshapes every interaction around the individual. At its core, narcissism is driven by a deep need for validation, control, and a carefully maintained image, and everything else, including relationships, becomes secondary to that need. One of the clearest signs of this pattern is the use of unnecessary lies, where a person does not lie to escape danger or difficulty, but lies even when there is no need, simply to maintain a certain image or to control how they are perceived. These lies are often subtle, polished, and delivered with confidence, and when the listener believes them, there is a visible satisfaction, because the belief of others becomes a form of validation. This is not about truth, but about control over perception, where reality is adjusted to fit the image they want to project. Another aspect of this behavior is the way they present themselves in front of others, where they create an image that is almost flawless, convincing people that they are caring, responsible, and deeply invested in their relationships. In social settings, within extended family or among friends, they may appear as the ideal partner, the ideal parent, or the ideal individual, and this image is carefully maintained through selective behavior and well-crafted communication. Yet the reality within close relationships often tells a different story, where the same care, attention, and understanding that is displayed publicly is not consistently present in private. This creates a sharp contrast between perception and reality, where others see something admirable, while those closest experience something entirely different. This duality is not accidental, but part of the same pattern, where external validation is prioritized over genuine connection. Within the family, this behavior becomes more intense because relationships are closer and influence runs deeper. A partner may find themselves constantly adjusting, compromising, and suppressing their own needs in order to maintain stability, while receiving very little in return that feels consistent or genuine. Children, in particular, are deeply affected because they begin to grow within an environment where their role is not to be themselves, but to support the image or needs of the parent. They may be appreciated when they reflect well on the parent, when they achieve something that enhances the parent's image, or when they behave in ways that align with expectations, and they may feel overlooked or criticized when they do not. Over time, this creates a pattern where the child's sense of worth becomes linked to approval rather than authenticity, and this can have long-term effects on their confidence, their relationships, and their understanding of themselves. Another defining trait is the way narcissistic behavior handles disagreement or criticism, where instead of engaging openly, the response often shifts towards deflection, denial, or manipulation. The conversation may be redirected, facts may be altered, or the situation may be reframed in a way that protects their position while leaving the other person confused. This creates a cycle where clarity becomes difficult because the reality of the situation is constantly being reshaped, and over time, the other person may begin to doubt their own understanding. This is how manipulation operates, not always through force, but through repetition, where perception is gradually influenced until it becomes uncertain. In such an environment, relationships lose their balance because one side continues to give, adjust, and accommodate, while the other continues to take, control, and redefine. The most important step in dealing with such behavior is not confrontation driven by emotion, but recognition driven by clarity, because once the pattern is seen clearly, it becomes difficult to remain unaffected by it. Understanding this does not mean accepting it, and it does not mean continuing in the same way, but it creates the possibility of stepping back, setting boundaries, and reducing the influence such behavior has on one's life. Distance, in many cases, becomes necessary, not as punishment, but as protection, because continuous exposure to such patterns can erode clarity, confidence, and emotional stability. This is not about labeling a person, but about recognizing behavior that has a consistent impact, because when the impact is clear, the response must also become clear. And the clarity required here is simple, where one sees the pattern without distortion, understands its effect without denial, and chooses to step out of it without hesitation. Because any relationship that consistently demands adjustment without offering genuine balance does not sustain well-being, and recognizing that is the beginning of restoring it.